Okay, so I first want to just thank everybody for being here. I see a couple of familiar faces. Hey, my name is Briana. Clearly, I work at the Silverroom, and I'm really, really excited to be doing um, this or hosting this book talk between Scheherazade and Salamisha, who are sisters. And this is a really, really special moment because this is the first time they're talking about this book together. So y'all are really, really in for a treat. My understanding of the book after I did a little bit of research and skimmed through, I think what's so interesting about this one is that it has an academic element to it, but it has a very, very personal element to it. And most of us have, at least, if we haven't read the book, The Color Purple, we've seen the movie or we've seen Broadway. So this is something that is so embedded into our culture and our history when it comes to literature, when it comes to cinema, when it comes to theater. So I'm just really, really excited for you all to talk to us about this book, and just about your connection to each other and to this work. So without further ado, I'm gonna let you all speak on all of this. I hope that intro was good. I know I didn't get into all the bio stuff, but I don't want to spend time doing that. I want y'all to do y'all.
Well, thank you so much, Briana. And I also like to thank Angie and of course, Eric for this gracious invitation. And for all of you who chose to spend this evening with Scheherazade and me as we meditate and reflect on The Color Purple and what it's meant to us as readers and as artists, but also what it's meant to us as activists and as feminists in this world. So I'm just gonna do a quick reading, and then I know Scheherazade has lots of questions. Normally, I have no idea what she's gonna ask me, so it's gonna be a very organic conversation. I'm very much looking forward to it. So I'm gonna read from the end of the first chapter, and so I'll just jump in. So around page 14, I'm beginning. So at the end of The Color Purple, Seeley narrates, "Dear God, dear stars, dear trees, dear sky, dear peoples, dear everything, dear God," and comes full circle with her journey to self and community. Like Seeley's own rebirth, The Color Purple continues to reemerge, with each iteration serving as a new and often even sharper reflection of the time in which it appears, enabling the novel to have a literary timelessness and political timeliness that few American Bildungsromans have ever achieved. The rise and fall of the novel's original bold politics parallels Black women's political journeys to the center of American life, with each subsequent version, for better and for worse, inspiring and being inspired by the zeitgeist. In Search of the Color Purple is my retelling of that journey. This is a book not only about how Alice Walker birthed her masterpiece, but also about how her singular story shaped and continues to shape generations of readers who found solace and sisterhood by embracing Seeley. The path that Walker gives us in The Color Purple, from Seeley's original trauma to her sexual awakening with Shug, from eventual forgiveness of Albert to her final reconnection with her sister, her children, and to the God in everything and everyone, is not merely character growth, but a model for our healing and transformation from oppressed subjects to empowered citizens. We will never have to be other than who we are in order to be successful, Seeley reminds us. We realize that we are ourselves unlimited and our experience is valid. It is for the rest of the world to recognize this if they choose. In my research and road trips, my interviews and pilgrimages, I came across people, Black and white, men and women, young and old, queer and straight, who have all found themselves in Seeley's own journey to self. They, like me, still hold on to the moment of revelation like a talisman and see The Color Purple as the ultimate book to which we should all turn in our weary and dystopic times. As the Me Too movement has taken hold, millions of survivors of sexual violence have come forward with their own stories of sexual assault. Despite the fact that this usage of this term, Me Too, was coined by a Black woman, Tarana Burke, to help African-American girls, like the 13-year-old in Alabama, who told her in 1997 about being sexually abused by her mother's boyfriend. Black girls and women, victims, continue to find themselves at risk for being ignored or rendered invisible. Or, as was Walker's fate after the release of the movie, indicted by other Black people for perpetuating racist stereotypes about Black male sexuality, or for colluding with an unfair criminal justice system if they claim to have been assaulted by an African-American man. As a result, the vulnerability of Black girls and women and the ongoing backlash they publicly receive, as in the cases of those allegedly assaulted by Bill Cosby, Russell Simmons, or R. Kelly, or privately experienced, as in the cases of hundreds of Black girls and young women with whom my sister and I have worked with in our Black feminist organization, A Long Walk Home, means that we as a society remain disinterested in the fates of millions in order to protect a chosen few. No other writer has been able to imagine the whole arc, the breaking of the silence, the coming to terms with how sexual trauma has impacted individual survivors, their children, and their communities, and the means by which assailants can seek real accountability for their actions, make amends, and ultimately be forgiven than Alice Walker. Her perspective, though unique, was also shaped by her particular vantage point as a Black woman. Naturally, I write about the things I know best from the angle I know best, Alice said in an interview while on the set of the Color Purple movie in 1985. Black women have a different angle from which to write. They see things from a different point of view. Black women have to look out and through all those people who have traditionally been on top of them, the Black man, the white woman, the white man. She concluded, this creates a different way of looking at reality. Through her purple-hued looking glass, Walker imagined a world and created a novel that remains potent, ever prophetic, and a reminder of how far we as a nation still really have to go, while being an extraordinary vision of who we want to be. What else is there to say about The Color Purple? Walker exhaustedly asked me at the end of our first interview. Without skipping a beat, I reply, everything. I skipped over some pages there, so I saw you.
Yeah, I got it. That was great. I remember that moment, and you were like, when you asked her that, she said everything. Well, Salamishah, welcome to Chicago. Welcome to one of my favorite places, is the Silverroom. It's the epic place that I take everybody, epic in terms of culture in Chicago. So excited to have this first conversation together about this book that and this journey that really means so much to you, to us, to the world. And so kind of going to begin there. My first question actually for you is like how it's about your process to write this kind of book, right? A book that is in every type of way is already so epic. In terms of the awards it has won, and it's a film, it's a musical. Like, can you talk about like your own process of beginning to create and write a book and be on your own journey?
Yeah, thank you for that question. But partly I would like to say that what made it both easy and also incredibly intimidating was to write about someone who writes so well about herself. So Alice Walker not only has a really extensive archive, like an incredible archive at Emory University, but she's also not, in addition to her being a great fiction writer and a great essayist and a great poet, she also is such a self-reflexive writer. And so she's written essays about how The Color Purple, the story came to her, the controversies about The Color Purple. She has a whole book about the movie itself, right? And so in some ways I was able to, I think one of the hardest parts of a book like this is trying to get inside the writer's imagination, right? So there's a lot of moments when I'm trying to show the stakes, not only of the novel itself, but also Alice's own journey to create such a novel. But luckily I had access to both her good friends. I know Beverly Guy-Sheftel is on this call with us as well, her archive, and then her public writing that we all are familiar with about how her experience with The Color Purple. And then just, in the archive, you have interviews and letters people wrote to her, and really exciting and sometimes, conflicting correspondences. So I think for me, having all of that was a real way for me to understand the totality of what is The Color Purple. And then I just learned so much stuff because I, like most people, I did watch the movie, I did read the novel, but I had no idea of the love. I guess that's the best part. Even I knew the controversies, but I had no idea of the many, many sacrifices, not just that Alice made, but so many other people made to create the film and also the musical. So that was really eye-opening, but also out of respect for them and out of respect for the story of Celie, I really wanted to take on that energy and take on those stories and then present them to you all, so you can understand not only why The Color Purple is so enduring, but also what it took for it to land to you all, whether it was in the theater or whether it was on screen or whether it was in your hands as a book.
Yeah, and I think I have many questions in my head too. I'm trying to figure out which one to ask, but I think that I remember writing a note. I'm oh, and you said it when you just read the what you part of the book that you read, but I remember writing oh, this is not just a book about someone's journey or impact book, right? It's not just about that. It's this, it really is about a journey to oneself, right? How all these different people that you interviewed or came in contact, rediscovered who they were. And so I guess I was oh, this is a, not only is the public how it has been received, such an enormous kind of weight to it, but this idea of a journey to oneself, and how you begin to write a book about that. Yeah. So I guess that leads me to my next question, is really about your process to incorporate so much of yourself in this book, right? I know I shared with you how me and Solomon were when the book first came out and you were reading, you were oh my gosh, oh, that's in there, we were so much
Solomon being my partner.
Yeah, her partner. yeah. This will be intimate. Yeah, thank you, Salamishah, for the reference. But yeah, I think what there's parts that touched me because I never saw your story about surviving sexual violence. So you write so much about it, but it being so personal. And me, who I've documented your healing process. And so I remember saying this to myself in grad school when I decided to move to Chicago and become an art therapist. I said, oh, what would it be like if Salamishah photographed her own self, right? That was my premise of going to grad school, was how to help other survivors and for them to own their own story. And so I got a little emotional reading certain parts because I'm oh, Salamishah's, this is it. Salamishah's sharing her story here, right? And weaving it in through other people's Alice's story, and Oprah's. And so can you talk a little bit about that decision to incorporate the autobiographical and your own journey of healing?
Yeah, thank you for all of that, and also for being such an instrumental force and spirit in my own recovery and survival. Yeah, I mean, I think, again, to bring up Alice herself, I mean, she's such a honest and writer, and I think a lot of the essayists that I've constantly been drawn to, like Baldwin or Audre Lorde. They have this ability to really blend the personal and the political and cultural criticism, bell hooks as well. And so I've always, admired that and respected that and wanted to do that myself. And so I think it's hard to write a book about The Color Purple. It would be hard for me to have written a book about The Color Purple without it being so personal. The background for how I got to this project, I've been working on this book on Nina Simone for a while now, and an opportunity came to me to write this book on The Color Purple. And I immediately knew who I was when I first read The Color Purple. I knew how I'd returned back to it over the years. I knew that person. And so I was able to write the proposal within a month. Like my Nina Simone proposal took 2 years to write, but the Alice Walker, The Color Purple proposal took a month. And there's something, so formative about my relationship to The Color Purple. In my book, I talk about the summer of before my senior year of high school, and I read 3 books that changed the fate of my life. Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, Malcolm X's autobiography, and Alice Walker's The Color Purple. And those 3 books kind of gave me a prism through which I could see the world after that moment. There's like a before those books and there's after those books. And then my senior year, 2 major national racial melodramas occurred. The first was Anita Hill testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee with allegations of sexual harassment with Clarence Thomas. And in the spring, the LAPD officers who violently beat Rodney King, 3 of the 4 were acquitted, and the other one, the jury was unable to render a verdict. So that was the context in which I really came of age. And those books shaped that. And then The Color Purple in particular kind of stayed with me because I was sexually assaulted my first year of college, and then again my junior year of college. And so I don't know, I always found Alice Walker's work to be especially powerful for me because she was able to have this unique way of having a really clear critique of racism, and also critique of patriarchy, and also was just a beautiful writer. And all of that kind of like kept me going in my undergrad years when I was trying to figure out who I was as a feminist and as a Black feminist. And so The Color Purple was I had arguments about The Color Purple that I talked about in the book. My first year of undergrad, I taught The Color Purple when I was my first year of teaching at Penn when I went back. And so it was just such a important book for me as I came of age professionally, politically, and personally. So I knew that. And so to take myself out of the story of The Color Purple would have been disingenuous, but also not in the spirit of the writer herself, Alice Walker.
Yeah, no, I think you just to pivot to that moment. I think there's a quote that you that often you read about Alice being when she overlooks like the mountains in her at her home, and you felt like she was like the freest person. I mean, that's not why, but like, can you talk about that a little bit? Like you saying that Alice is like, well, I think that I'm saying that because like the way you had to be so honest with yourself to incorporate yourself in this book, and then like you're saying that she's the freest person that you know, right? Yeah.
So what did I mean by that? Yeah, so when you were with me, so as the book opens with Scheherazade and I traveling like 3 hours north of San Francisco on these very curvy mountainous roads to see Alice Walker. And I'm nervous. I think I was wearing this outfit actually, which is serendipitous.
That outfit. Yeah.
I was wearing this dress, and when I was driving, I was wearing sneakers, and then when we got to the house, I put on cowboy boots. And I talk about just my own you know, both having to hold in the so many emotions, because I was trying to do like a professional interview, but so much of what, you know, Alice Walker's work has meant to me, having to contain that, and not have it spill over, because she's never met me, she doesn't know who I am. But also just the fact that she lives atop of 40 acres of land, and that she was so comfortable in her own body and her own skin, and that's something that, as you, if you read my book, you can see that that's something that was hard earned, that kind of comfort, that kind of bodily confidence. So just to see her atop of, she bought 20 acres and then she bought the other 20, seeing her atop of 40 acres of land, and what that means to Black people, but also what it means to be to a daughter and a granddaughter of sharecroppers, and the way in which her relationship to land is part of Black freedom, was also kind of what I was trying to capture in that moment. So yeah, I think that's, and then, you know, I continue in the book and I talk about Janie Crawford, who's the heroine of Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. And oftentimes people make the connection, of course, between Zora and Alice, partly or in great part because of Alice's commitment to, in some ways, reviving Zora's legacy, in the beautiful essay Looking for Zora, but also in the ways in which she edited her work and just really ensured in the 1970s that we knew who Zora Neale Hurston was and is. But that she wasn't Zora Neale Hurston, not at least Zora Neale Hurston in late life. And that I compared to Janie Crawford, who at the end of Their Eyes Are Watching God, who's gone through many trials and tribulations, comes home with the ability to tell her story on her own terms, and is free, or as free as she could be within the confines of that time.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember her when she looked over the mountains, because I photographed, and she said, she's like, it reminds me of a vulva. And I was like really shocked that like she said that, like, you know, like how the dips in the mountain. But it showed me how free she is also with her sexuality, and sensuality, to like, in, you know, this Mother Earth of that the land, and the connections to womanhood, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me, like, I don't know what to do with that, but
I forgot that moment. That's why I was like,
no, yeah. Well, it was like,
yeah.
you said that,
I
like,
believe you.
who needs heaven when you have this? There's I think you wrote in your book. But also, I think land is also another theme. I think for you as a writer, like your process of your travels, but also Alice's process as a writer for this book. Can you talk about like land and what that, you know, what that?
Well, I mean, you know, the story starts coming to her when she's on a hike with her sister, and she's living in New York City, and it doesn't take hold. She can't write the story of these characters, and so then she moves from New York to California, and she moves to San Francisco, and it's still, they still are not. They can't survive in an urban landscape. They can't come to fruition. They can't come to themselves, their wholeness. And so then she moves out to Northern California, even further north to Boonville. And there they're like, oh, this is a country place. And Alice described seeing a little Black boy on the side of the road who looked so full of and free of life, that she said any place in which a Black child could look so happy and free must be a good place. And so she ends up moving there. And then the characters just come to her. They come like a mad rush in some ways. And she writes the book within a year. And so I think that's part of what is really interesting about her process. And, you know, she found a space or a place that in some ways was familiar, right? It reminded her of growing up in Eatonton in terms of the beauty of the landscape. But of course, it was without segregated swimming pools and segregated libraries, and didn't have Uncle Remus statues around. And so it was both reflected her upbringing in Georgia, but it also represented something new. Now, the other thing for me with this book was just being able to spend so much time in Georgia. And again, Beverly is here, and Valerie Boyd, and I call them my feminist godmothers, because they were really instrumental in both my understanding of Alice, but also just being able to spend time in Atlanta, which is very different than Eatonton, sorry, I'm calling it Eatonton, where Alice is from, and just going on those trips with them and spending time and understanding where she was from, and going to the place where she was born, but also her family cemetery and her church. And it was just really, really kind of beautiful for me, who hasn't spent, I didn't grow up in the South, even though I have my grandmother is from North Carolina. And so, yeah, I don't know. I guess for me, the travels to California and to Georgia were really important to shaping the story and to New York, because I did a lot of interviews in New York too. In terms of the telling of this story, it was a story of like landscape and geography, and also Black people's movement, and being able, her characters needing to be free and to move, Alice's own journeys throughout the world before she wrote The Color Purple, and then my own journey to tell this story.
So I feel like there was like so much that went into it, like you traveling, you going to the archive. I'm like obsessed about like the fact, I think one of the questions you even asked her when you met was like about the archive, and like, how did she know? Did she know that who she would become? I like love that question, because she was like archiving everything, right? Like, can you talk a little bit about that archive? It wasn't my question, but I'm gonna ask that question. Like that going.
Yeah.
Yeah, her process.
Yeah, I mean, it's the opposite. It's the opposite of the Zora Neale Hurston that Alice went in search of, because she, writes beautifully about being a young writer and going to Florida and in search of Zora Neale Hurston, and unable to find, there's writings of hers, of course, but there's not that there was a amnesia around Zora Neale Hurston in her hometown. And then also Alice goes to the cemetery and she doesn't see any marker. And so that she ends up buying a tombstone for Zora. And so to have someone who is as important as Zora Neale Hurston to end up penniless, working as a domestic in a caregiver institution, and to be in a cemetery without a marker, Alice just talks about how devastating that moment was, that moment. And so for me, in my book anyway,
she puts genius on the tombstone, right? Like she actually.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
She's like anthropologist, and then genius of the South, I think, what she writes. And so, yeah, I thought, well, what a different, and then I write so that her essay is called Looking for Zora, and then mine's Looking for Alice, but clearly Alice Walker is, both present with us, and then also that's not her fate. And so, and then she also has this voluminous archive that is just exquisite in Emory. And that one of the things I put on my Instagram, or we put on my Instagram page recently, was the quilt that she also made while she was writing The Color Purple, which I don't think a lot of people know that. And that was like her first quilt or something like that, which is like it's like a really beautiful quilt for your first quilt. So that's that a relationship between quilting and writing. And so, but your question was about the archive. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really, for lucky us and lucky Alice to be able to have able to maintain that archive and to have it be in such a amazing institution as Emory, and for us to be able to access it, and think about all of the Black women who have created great works, or who didn't have the ability to have their works recognized, who are without an archive. And so there's a radical act of remembering that I think is important to also consider when we talk about the archive, and Alice's insistence on the work that she did and the people that she wrote about, mainly but not exclusively Southern Black people, Black women, that her imagining of them or her writing about them was worth preserving for posterity. that's very deep, and it's really kind of extraordinary. So
Yeah, this idea of, of, of worth and lack, not erasure. And then she started to archive like really young too, right? Like 20, was it?
yeah, well, I mean, she just kept a lot of stuff. So I don't know if she was consciously thinking it was an archive, but it's what you keep and what you decide not to throw away too. So.
Yeah. I want to talk about the elephant in the room because we're sisters.
Oh, is that the elephant?
That's the elephant in the room. Elephant in the room is us. Um, no, but the theme of the book a lot is about sisterhood. I'm thinking about how your book is sandwiched between two friendships, right? Gloria Steinem and Beverly Guy Sheffman. Hi, Beverly.
Shefdahl, yeah, good.
Oh, Shefdahl. These love letters, right? And there's so much weaving of friendships and throughout the book. Can you talk about sisterhood in your book?
Yeah, and I love how you made Beverly Spellman and Shefdahl. You made them one and the same, and they are one and the same. So,
Wait, I'm sorry, Beverly.
No, I'm saying that's great. Beverly and Spellman. Yeah. No, it's great. So sisterhood and friendship, female friendships. Yeah, I mean, that's like the heart of The Color Purple, right? And that's one of the things that's so beautiful, is this relationship between Nettie and Celie that's at the heart of the novel. But then these other friendships, like for me, as I wrote my book, there's 3 sections. There's Celie, there's Shug, there's Sophia. And then there are also, it's the book, the movie, and the musical. And what's pretty wonderful about The Color Purple is that it is Celie's journey to self, but it's also the story of a very it's a blended family and a beloved community, right? A blended family before we use those terms, and definitely a beloved community over time that's created through Celie's eyes and Celie's healing. And so, yeah, I think sisterhood is the crux of the novel, but over time, by the time we get to the musical, it's this expansive definition that Nettie's not as central of a character by the time we get to the musical, but Sophia's relationship with Celie is really important, and Shug's relationship with Sophia, and then of course Shug and Celie are the penultimate couple in this story of the Color Purple. So there's all these ways in which I think intimacy between Black women is so pivotal to The Color Purple, but also what's at stake in that intimacy. There's healing. There's a rejection of white supremacy. There's an attempt to have not an attempt. She's a strong critique of colonization, right, through Nettie's stories in West Africa. So there's all this stuff that sisterhood becomes both in actual relationships that people have, but it also becomes a way of reimagining democracy, reimagining freedom, reimagining healing. All of that's at stake in sisterhood, which we oftentimes, don't think about sisterhood as being a foundational tenet of society, of a free civil society. But I think it's so extraordinary and exceptional the way the story is told here. But also, I'm a firm believer in sisterhood as the kind of a model of feminism, if done right. So, but that's because of you. So, anyway.
No, I remember you wanted to do this talk on my birthday, in honor of sisterhood, and I was like, "That's a very nice idea, but no." I want to my birthday. You did.
Oh, sorry.
We were talking with Eric. Like, when is Cher's birthday? Let's do the talk on her birthday. And I'm like, let's not do the talk on my birthday. So birthday.
Yeah.
In honor of sisterhood.
Yeah.
Wait, I do have. I am
like the opposite of sisterhood, but yeah. Okay. Yeah, it would not have been good on your birthday. Sure.
Okay, so I wrote down a lot of surprises for myself. Obviously I feel like a lot of readers who do not know the behind the scenes of what it meant to create the musical, the film, the book. If you said top 3 surprises, what were they for you? Well, your top 3, oh my God, I didn't know that. And and then
yeah. Quincy Jones, just his level of sacrifice, his love of the story.
Quincy Jones too.
Just like, I mean, if you see the documentary that Rashida did, you can see there that he really has a kind of breakdown after The Color Purple comes out, because, you know, he's coming from thriller to then wanting to really make this movie. And he really wanted to make a movie with Black people that could stand the test of time, right? That was going to have all this kind of acclaim and had the financial backing and the studio support to be heralded, but also to persevere. And then, you know, in the documentary, they talk about how he produces the film. So if anyone knows, Quincy Jones was the main producer of the film, but then he also has to write the score. He forgot he had to write the score. And so that's when he like literally has like, he's like, oh, so just his, you know, it's his love for this story. And I think it was important for me to include Quincy Jones and to interview him and to interview Danny Glover, because so much of the Color Purple, the story of it is the controversy about how Black men rejected it and really vilified Alice and really were quite cruel and sexist in their response. But then you also have these two, in this case between Quincy and Danny, really significant and important and African-American artists, male artists who really believed in the story and fought for it. So that was like probably number one. Number two was reading Alice's original screenplay for The Color Purple, and just how, and that's available to anyone in the book, The Same River Twice, that she writes, that she published about the movie and the making of the movie. But the screenplays, you know, so basically quickly, when Quincy and Stephen pitched the film to her, they asked her to write the original screenplay. And so it causes lots of anxiety and, you know, in a way, you know, and she has nightmares and she's trying to write this. And she writes this beautiful screenplay in which Shug becomes an even more important character or even more central character than she's in the novel. But what's interesting is that she doesn't trust, I don't think she doesn't trust that this will be the story. So she has two different titles for it called, I think, After the Sunset. I may have made, Watch the Sunset. Sorry, Watch the Sunset or The Color Purple. So she has two titles. And the third thing, oh gosh, this is a big plot point of mine. When we're talking about her grandmother, who the character Celie is based on, and you and I were there when Alice was looking for the picture to show us, because she talks about how the ugliness, she writes a poem about this too, but that the ugliness that Celie feels and the ugliness that the reader believes is imposed on her through Pa, the character who rapes her and impregnates her and then takes away her children and then marries her off to Albert. And so for Alice, she's always like, I don't understand why anyone believes Pa's version of Celie. Like, that's ridiculous to her because he's clearly an evil person. But then she was looking for the picture of her grandmother and she couldn't find it. And then a couple of months later, when I was in Atlanta for the Women's Studies Association conference, and Beverly was interviewing Alice, and you and I were on a panel with Loretta and Aisha about sexual assault in Black women's organizing, I go to the archive and I look up Rachel Little's name, and I there's only one Rachel that's there with a photograph. And I find this photograph and I see her and I'm amazed by how I couldn't understand or see her in the way that she looked or the way that she was. So yeah, I think that was one of the biggest, those are top three surprises.
Well, I was just surprised that they were based on real people. Like, these are real, you know what I mean? But I love how you put that family tree in the beginning. But it also makes you, I think the stake goes higher when they're like actually real people.
Based on, yeah, no, that's true. So that's a good, yeah. So that, you know, Harpo is based at least on her father, Sophia is based on her mother. As I said, Celie was based on Rachel. Nettie is based on her maternal grandmother with the same name, Nettie. And Albert is based on her grandfather. And Shug was in fact a real woman who was in a relationship with her grandfather, who also went by the nickname Shug. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's why both the characters, I mean, they are characters. These are stories that Alice may have wanted for fates that these characters, that the real life people couldn't have for themselves because of the society that they were born into and the time in which they lived. But when the critique came, when the criticism came from the boycotts and the bans and the petitions, and the threats came, I think it also, and that she was somehow anti-black black family and anti-black man, and seen as colluding with racists at the expense of the black family in her storytelling. It cut deeper and differently because these were also real flesh and blood people that these characters were based on, and so they weren't caricatures or they weren't stereotypes. And so I think that's also the other part of realizing who they were for her, and the inspiration for the characters made me think about those controversies differently as well.
And I know I have a lot of questions of like running out of time, but my other like surprise, I think, is like my imagination or my memory of how controversial this book was, and also how controversial the film was. Like, because I think about this film and the movie and the book as a super black, right? Like this super like, you know, black, part of the black archive. There's certain things like that is just defines who we are, right? Like this is like a black feminist text, right? And, you know, for the musical, like people would go with their grandmothers, you know what I mean? Like, you know, like churches go together to see. So I guess I'm saying I just forget the sacrifices for this film, this book to have been created. How controversial it was, how many picket lines within our own community around this film.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've learned since publishing the book is that the story of The Color Purple is the story of Black America, right? And so, you know, the debates about sexuality, the debates about sexual violence, the representations of racism and racial violence that both Celie's biological father is a victim of in terms of lynching, Sophia is a victim of in terms of the mob violence against her and being forced into domestic servitude. And Squeak too is Squeak, Mary Agnes, the character who's sexually assaulted by the prison guard when she tries to go to see Sophia. So there's all the white prison guard. So there's all these ways in which all of those complexities and all of those contentious points of our identity and experiences in this country are explored in The Color Purple, and also colonization and the way in which missionaries went to West Africa, but also saw the way in which Europeans were had colonized Africa, and the parallels between that and Jim Crow segregation. So there's so much in The Color Purple. And so that's one thing, but then the other thing is just how beloved it is. So to see something that is under attack when it comes out, but really when it gets on the screen, to becoming kind of quintessentially Black or uber Black is pretty remarkable. A testament to both the times that we live in, the people who fought for this story to be repeatedly taught, and the beauty of the story, but also the way in which it created the possibility for it to be such a seminal or classic text for us now. Like the Color Purple, Alice's vision for The Color Purple is kind of where we are now in terms of our reception of it. So that's pretty interesting and exciting, but also it's such a meme. You know, there's all these ways in which The Color Purple ends up as part of our identities. Even if we've never read the book, you've seen the movie. If you've seen the movie, you've seen the musical. If you haven't seen any of those, you've seen people hand clapping as a GIF on Instagram or Twitter. So there's all these ways in which it's so ubiquitous. And again, that notion of sisterhood and how it becomes the story that is so dominant. So yeah, my joke is that, you know, it's not it's not Martin or Obama or Jesus, right? But in the Black household, but as a book, it is pretty high up there, close to the Bible, but not quite for Black people. So.
Well, okay, so I mean, I think what not only is this book about your personal journey and sisterhood and such insight about the creation, but you have stellar interviews. You have like the access of
Oh yeah.
so
Thank you.
many
Yep.
of so many amazing people um, in this, and so I kind of want to highlight, you know, Oprah, which I did
Oprah. Yeah.
think that I could learn more because you know, with Oprah, you feel like you know so much of her, right? Like her connection with this book. But I gotta say, Salamisha, this is I think there's two parts that made me like a little teary eyed, like your story entwined and you being so honest about your healing. And Oprah, I was just like, I don't think I saw, you know, because yeah, so it's, you know, there's a lot that I hear in terms of the cast. I was just thinking Whoopi Goldberg says how she's like nothing like that character, right? And
Mhm.
Oprah's like, I'm everything like the, you know, like that. I saw myself in
And Steely. Yeah.
yeah, you know, like
Mhm.
um and then I just wanted to say like this one thing when, and then I'll open it up. Then you shared with her just a little bit about your own story as a survivor. And you said how me photographing your journey helped you heal, right? And
Mhm.
you asked her what helped her heal, and she said, the color purple helped me, right? And that, you know, that and the show was her own therapy. And I was a little
Mhm.
sad by that because, like, in one hand, you had, I know it's, you said me, but there was, you had community. You know, you would list like a lot of other folks, and for her to like list the book and her show.
Mhm. Mhm.
Can you talk about Oprah?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oprah
I mean, but I don't think
and
her
how,
show. I
yeah,
think her show's akin to us doing SOAR's Story of a Rape Survivor, meaning that for those who don't know, Scheherazade and I for almost 20 years now have been doing a performance that Scheherazade documented my healing, and then the performance is a cast of these beautiful Black women artists, Gochi and Patrice and Hetty and Regine, who bring the story to life, to bring her photographs to life and tell my story through their performances. And so that repetition of that, I think, has been so crucial to my healing. And I think for Oprah, what she did on that show, you know, she tells her story for the first time the year that the movie comes out, right? And so that opening up of the creating of a space in which she could tell her own story, and then have all these other survivors come on and sometimes have perpetrators come on because she's trying to fix the thing that harms everyone. I think it was, you know, that it was a constant disclosure she created, for our generation anyway,
she created.
the public disclosure as a possibility. And so I think it really was, you know, she tells, I don't know if I put it in the book because I can't remember, but she told me the story about being in Baltimore when she was a Baltimore reporter, and she was backstage or in the green room, and she'd interviewed a woman who was a survivor, and Oprah says privately to her, well, so am I. And the woman's like, well, why didn't you say anything, you know? And so it takes the color purple, not just the book, which she becomes a zealot for, right? When she reads that book, she starts handing it out. And my joke is that that's the beginning of the Oprah Winfrey book club. Like that was her first
Yeah,
moment.
that was
But
also
but
so interesting. Yeah. Yeah, go
but
ahead.
after she does the movie, that's when she tells her story. And so I think that, so she responds to that woman in Baltimore years later through this process. So in some ways, yeah, I mean, I understand, like, you know, she hadn't gone to formal therapy, but I do think there's something really powerful for her anyway in that constant, and not just her story, but that she created a community of people who came on a talk show who spoke their truth. And so it shifted, you know, lots of ways in which people, I think, felt comfortable telling their story at the same time.
No, I was like at awe at the same time, but it also, I think, because you actually write out her trauma, like, you know, like, and I was
Yeah,
like,
no, that's like
Oprah,
devastating. Yeah.
Oprah was criminalized as a child, like, you know, like her mom was
Yeah.
put her
Yeah.
in juvenile. Like,
Yeah.
I think that was like that, and then
Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's horrible.
I think we're going to open it up, but I asked you to read the quote about Oprah.
Yeah.
No,
Wait, what page is it again? 140.
138. No.
Oh, 138.
Maybe we won't read it.
Yeah, yeah, I'm here. Which part do you want me to read again? I have 136.
Well, it's all my life I had to fight.
Oh, okay, hold on. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll do it quickly.
Okay.
136.
136. Okay.
Because Sophia rejects the oppressive categories into which she was born, her fall is devastating. I guess I asked, sorry, I should read it right before this. I asked Oprah what was the inspiration for Sophia. And so she says that Sophia is a combination of so many women in my history, Oprah says to me. I grew up with all these church women around me. I used my Aunt Ida. She was our matriarch. Because Sophia rejects the oppressive categories into which she was born, her fall is devastating. After Harpo betrays her by trying to beat her into submission, she fights back and then takes her children and whatever love she has left for Harpo with her. But before she goes, she confronts Celie for advising Harpo to beat her in order to make her bend to his will. Stomping through the grassy fields, Sophia gives one of the most memorable monologues of all time. All my life, I had to fight. I had to fight for my daddy. I had to fight for my uncles. I had to fight my brothers. A girl child ain't safe in a family of men, but I never thought I'd have to fight in my own house. Oprah did that scene in one take. That line was my anthem, Oprah recalls. I didn't need anyone else there. I was saying that line for myself and every woman who has ever been sexually assaulted, molested, raped by an uncle, a cousin, a brother. A girl child ain't safe in a world full of men. I had to fight my brothers, my uncles. That's my story. I don't need anyone to help me tell that story. Oprah not only stole the scene, but over time, Sophia and Oprah became, in a way, indistinguishable from each other. In 1985, Oprah told a reporter that the tragedy of Sophia was that she couldn't assert herself at that time in 1922 and be who she wanted to be. And I'll just read something quickly at the end. And I ask her, because she starts off identifying with Celie. And so I ask her, have you caught up with Sophia? Not to the point where I punt somebody out. I have caught with Sophia in the sense of not making a decision that's not going to benefit my whole self, Oprah tells me. Just this week, I was asked about interviewing Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which I originally agreed to do. Then they came back with all these constraints, like you can't ask her about the court or current events. And I said, this week we can't talk about current events. And that week was after Justice Kavanaugh was confirmed. You got the wrong person. I can't do that. I literally said to her, I can't compromise to make things comfortable for everyone else. Noting how much she pleased people at the beginning of her career, Oprah reflects on her long journey to self. When you don't feel like you have the right to say no to someone actually touching your body, there's no boundary of your physical personhood. It takes a lifetime to learn to establish that.
All right. Thank you, Salamisha, for reading that. That part has a lot for me because during the racial justice movement, I remember being at the police at the headquarters during Dante Servine's, when they were protesters were trying to fire Dante Servine, who is the detective who killed Mikia Boyd. And her brother came out of the hearing, and he said, all my life I had to fight. And then he quoted Kendrick Lamar's, he's like, but we gonna be all right. And I remember like holding on to like that to make me like if he could be all right, then I could be all right, in this moment. And so thinking about how Alice Walker's words then goes into the racial justice movement today, right? And became the anthem. And so if you had more time, I would talk about these two women in your life, Nina and Alice, and their contributions. But we would like to open, thank you, Salamisha, this was so good. I'd like to open it up at least for maybe one or two questions in the chat. I know this.
Someone did actually have a question, and I just want to say thank you. I think even just like putting in the perspective from like a Black feminist perspective, definitely like gives it a different layer of power and impact, especially right now, because unfortunately and fortunately it still resonates. But okay, let me see. I did see a question and someone said, what is the next book you're working on?
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, okay, that's good. So who's that on brand? I'm working on a book on on Nina Simone that I've been working on for quite a bit of time now, and I had the honor of being able to write this Color Purple book. Take a break from that and to go back to it, and so yeah, I'm back with Nina Simone, and yeah, I mean, it's another book about a Black woman genius from the South, but obviously from an earlier time period in many ways, and yeah, so that's what I'm working on now.
Okay,
But
another
similar
question.
styles, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean
No,
to.
no, it's similar styles like journeys and finding people and stuff like that. So.
Do you and your sister plan to work on anything together in the near future?
We're constantly
Oh, well, who
together.
are these people? I can't see the questions, but I'm like, is this me asking the question myself? Yes, Scheherazade and I work together all the time with A Long Walk Home, but we're also working on a film project based on a story of a rape survivor, a documentary based on the performance. So that's our creative collaboration soon to come with others.
Okay, and here goes one. I know the name on this one. This is from Rachel. She says, did engaging so profoundly with a work of fiction inspire you to write a piece of fiction yourself?
No, not yet. So I think that comes, but I'm still in the creative nonfiction world. But I do feel like it made me a better writer and a better storyteller. Just to live and to be so close to the writing of such an amazing figure like Alice Walker. If you take on even 10% of that energy, you've grown in ways, and I grew in ways that I didn't expect, that I'm so happy to have experienced.
Let's see. Does anybody else have any questions? We still have some time. You can
I
throw
guess
them in
people
the
could get off
chat.
throw them on the chat. Yeah, I mean, we can see everyone, so it's like weird. They
Yeah.
can get off mute too if they're so bold. But I don't want to take over the.
Yeah.
Oh, a lot of thank yous. I think I kind of have a little bit of a question. I think the term Black feminist, Black feminism is such a controversial term, and especially when we talk about interracial traumas that we're dealing with at a time when racial justice is such a heated topic. How do you find the way to have these conversations within our community about violence against Black girls and women? Because I think, the literature is one part and that kind of assists, but it's like, how do you then kind of navigate through the art piece and then get into real conversation about these matters?
Yeah, I mean, Cher could talk about this, and so can a lot of other people on this phone call. I think, it's one thing to have the conversations now. It was so hard to have them 20 years ago, all right? When we started, Cher started documenting my story. I shared my story publicly for the first time in 1997, and that was in a different period, a different time period. But we've been lucky in our journey to have found so many other Black women who paved the way. In my case, Charlotte Pierce Baker. I was a research assistant for her, and she wrote the book Surviving the Silence, which told her own story of sexual assault, but also interviewed many women. We were in Philadelphia, and we were in Aisha Shahida Simmons's Know the Rape documentary, which was about rape within the Black community, the first film to do so. That's when we were very beginning of us doing Story of Rape Survivor, and so we were, whether it's kismet or luck or both, but I think those were hard days when And they were probably even harder when they were harder when Alice was breaking the silence and Tizake was breaking the silence. And even harder, before or Reese Taylor and Rosa Parks. And so I think that we came of age in a moment and had community, and we felt alone a lot of times. I mean, now even though the situations are still dire and the lack of organizing and the lack of justice is still so real, there's a larger community for us to be part of and to be seen. But I think when we started, both I'm healing, right? I'm healing as an individual, and I'm trying to find community to make sure this doesn't happen to other people. And so those debates and we just kept with it though. Like we kept with it because, to be honest, like I've always been compelled by the fact that, like, if I don't talk about these issues of Black women, of Black girls, that's my responsibility. There are going to be a lot of other people who are going to talk about a lot of other issues, but we have to be committed to be talking about these issues. And so that became part of my life's work. But Cher, do you want to say what gave you the possibility or the courage, or the momentum to be?
Okay, I almost forgot the question, since you kind of the possibility and the momentum to do the work over
To be Black feminist, I guess.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what other choice there is, like, in terms of your own search and quest as a Black woman for freedom. Salamisha, my work a lot in Chicago is, in my life work is around Black girls right now, and I'm honoring them. I think they are the real sources in our community. They are the ones we go to for everything. And at the same time, I think my real life work as an adult is to protect that and make sure that they have a childhood. And so how do I fight and create visibility? I don't know any other kind of way. Like, I don't know what, because if you're fighting for your own liberation, we only have some things to win when you are protecting these true treasures in our community, right? Like, we all have something to win because they're such important people in our society, as we see from leading movements to and so I think if that has to be everyone's focus, not only mine, but I think everyone's, because they're that critical. In terms of how our society runs.
Can you all hear me? Hello?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you. My name is Donna Hammond. Thank you so much for this conversation. And I do have one question. As a student of seminary, the question that I have, I hear you all using the word Black feminist a lot in this conversation about Alice Walker and about The Color Purple. But yet, in my studies, that is a word that is just not a connotation of who we are when it comes to these fights and for our freedoms against sexual abuse and the like. And so she uses this term womanist. And so I just want to know how we're shaping that. If anyone else is here that can explain that to me, because I have been told that there's no such thing as a Black feminist, but instead of that, Black feminists are connotated as womanists, because the feminist movement was specifically for white women's, movements. It wasn't for us. So I just wanted to know how that fits into our roles as women, and how that why we're not using the word that she spoke of, and which is a womanist view.
Yeah, Beverly, do you want to chime in as well? But in Alice's definition of womanist, which she prefers as a term, feminist is still part of it. And when I asked her about the distinction for her, she talked both about the word womanist itself, playing on womanish, and it just sounded better. Like and also it's Southern for her, and so it was grounded in, like, The Color Purple is a kind of Southern Black feminist with Black woman's tradition of organizing, of living. So I think, so you're right to point out that she coined the term womanist, which is oftentimes has been taken up, I think, robustly in theology. I think I use the term Black feminist, and so maybe this is a distinction between me and Alice, because I do identify as a feminist, and I don't. And the way that I became a Black feminist is through my mother and through my aunt and through The Color Purple and through The Bluest Eye. So to me, I never really had. I have a strong critique of racism in the mainstream feminist movement, but I also saw myself as a daughter of centuries of Black women who were really talking about gender and racial oppression as simultaneous categories that were impacting us as a people. So that's kind of why I continue to, sometimes I say feminist, sometimes I say Black feminist, but that's how I came into feminism. And so I didn't come into it through a kind of white feminist tradition, even though I have continued to have strong coalitions with white feminists who are anti-racist. But so that's my particular take on it. I don't know if Beverly or Cher want to add to this, because it was more of a, go on.
Well, I was going to say, I think Beverly could add, but I did get to see when you were interviewing for The Color Purple with Alice Walker at her home, I was witnessing that conversation. I'm like, oh, this is like the great debate of womanist versus feminist. And what I got to witness is that it seems to be a lot of, like Alice doesn't have that same energy around like, you cannot say Black feminist, she's like, well, I have this term out there. We should say that. That's a, so I just remember her like, she didn't have that, it wasn't as hard of a debate as I thought it was this big thing. But I think she saw that Black feminism within womanists, like, but
yeah, she just did like the term Black feminist, like she thought it was a hard term. I like the term Black feminist. Yeah, so, but I don't think the concept she's not antagonistic to the concept, but
that's what I meant.
She believes in that. Yeah, but she believes in the term womanist. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
That's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, this is the kind of conversation I like to get into, but we gotta wrap up now. We're out of time. It went really fast. Let me just ask, how do y'all feel about taking one more question? Somebody has their hand up.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
How's
this is so
everybody
great.
feeling? I don't want to like do a hard 8:15 stop if like people are kind of vibing. So let's take one more question. C. Dale Gadsden, you're up.
Oh, Dale.
Gadsden.
Oh my goodness. Oh, wow.
Okay, I'll come on camera just because I'm talking
Oh
to
my
you.
God. Oh my God.
How you doing, Salamishah? And I'm matching your yellow. This is actually at the Toni Morrison Bench by the Road event where we had the yellow umbrellas. I'm only coming on because this has been great. I really loved listening and reading your work. One of the things in terms, I'm coming on just because of the whole thing about feminism versus womanism.
Yeah, you can definitely add to that, please.
Alice Walker doesn't. It's not a binary for her.
Yeah, that's right.
Womanists are Black feminists. What she does with womanism, which is what I think is so powerful, is she makes it bigger. She says womanists encompass the entire community. Now, Black women have to sometimes come together just to do what they need to do for themselves, but then that gets turned back into sort of the kind of community organizing, Scheherazade, you're talking about. Black women are leading the fight, but part of the reason they can lead the fight when they start leading that fight, they become that's more of a womanist praxis. But it is definitely rooted in Black feminism, which is again different from white feminism. And as we all are saying, this is the kind of feminism that comes down the line through our DNA, as opposed to from theoretical books. You know, so I just wanted to get that, that they're not either or.
Yeah, I think that was very important. That's what I was trying to say when the conversation Salamishah had directly with her, like I was like, oh, that's what I saw, like that we have more weight to this than she does. Like she's like not making them polar opposites, that she's like, oh, but use this term that I have, is what she was kind of saying. But
and I actually do use that term. I just put together a nonprofit that's called the Womanist Project. So so I'm definitely going to work on that term. I am a theologian as well, so that's another reason.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's why we're so excited to see you. Even though it's,
can I get her name again?
Oh yes, C. Dale Gatson. Can you see it? C and then it's Dale, D-A-L-E, and then Gatson, G-A-D-S-D-E-N.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Does anyone have any final?
I was gonna say, I wanna let everybody know, for anybody who's looking for the book, we have it at the Silverroom. You can purchase it online at thesilverroom.com, or you can come and see us, have a key, and get your copy of the book as well. It is 8:14. If anybody has any final words or thoughts, throw them in the chat.
Okay, I just want to say there's so many amazing people on this. I'm looking at the names that have inspired me. So just thank everyone for coming. There's so much we didn't get to talk about. If there's anyone who wants to say anything, if Beverly, who wrote the lovely afterword, who is a guiding force for us Black feminists. I don't know if Beverly's, she's here, but I don't know if she wants to join in conversation.
I'll just say,
Yvonne.
Oh, she's there.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say one thing. I would say the Black feminism saved many Black women. Black feminism saved many Black women. And for me, it's been one of the most powerful, useful, brilliant political ideologies that I can attach myself to. And I'm always wondering why Black feminism, of all of the political ideologies and phrases, Black Christian, Black Marxist, we could just name all of them, why Black feminism produces so much angst. And I think that's something, and I would love to have that conversation.
Misogynoir, but
we should do that one time. Why that's so problematic, but not all of these other identity categories.
It's probably misogynoir, but again, we'd be going deep into the hole, which would be so fun. But I don't want to tip.
Yeah, I think Beverly, we should call it "Who's Afraid of Black Feminism?" should be the title of the conversation.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, okay. So, oh my goodness. I so wish we could keep going, because this is the fun part, right? It's when we start talking about these things and getting into these ideologies and these terminologies and just what we have to deal with as Black women. But I do want to wrap up because I want to be respectful of everybody's time. This was fantastic. Yeah. I'm honored that I was able to be a little fake host for this. Where can everybody find you on your socials? Give us all the rundowns.
Okay, well, it's just at Salamishah. I'm very but my name is a little tricky. My mom's on the call too. She and my father created my name. So it's at Salamishah on the various socials of Twitter and Instagram, salamishah.com. A Long Walk Home is www.alongwalkhome.org. And lots of stuff is coming your way in terms of organizing. Scheherazade and A Long Walk Home. We have board members on the call, Marlene and Maureen, and I think maybe Linda, good friends, DeHergway, people I'm a big fan of, Yvonne. So many people are here, or Rachel, A Long Walk Home family. But we're about to release a report called Black Girls in the Pandemic and Protest, which is about looking a study that we did interviewing Black girls about their experiences during this unprecedented time. So that's about to come out, drop, boom, next week. So look forward to that as well. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. This was so, I wish, this was such a good conversation. So thank you, Cher, because Shehrazade's birthday is on Saturday, but this is a preview of her sisterly affection for me and mine for her here as well. So thank you for doing this. Thank you, Silverroom, for having me. And thanks to all of you who have bought the color In Search of the Color Purple or plan to, but I don't know if you can see it. So yeah, you can see it. Okay.
And Scheherazade, please share your socials too. We want to know where to find you as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely visit A Long Walk Home, our organization. My Instagram, I'm also a photographer. It's Share Photographs is my IG. So that's where you can find.
I see Trina. Trina's here, our board member too, putting the shout outs on the chat. So thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
So
Okay.
much.
And I would also encourage everybody that's here, because the conversation was like so lively, so substantial and abundant. Drop your socials in there. Like, let's continue this community. If you want to find me, I'm at Briana Clearly on Instagram. I'm out here making films and stuff, making Black feminist films and things. And definitely, obviously, at the Silverroom, we're gonna keep it all moving and keep it all going for you. So thank everybody so much for being here. I'm sad that we have to wrap up, but I appreciate you all. We appreciate you all. The Silverroom family just appreciates this time and space that y'all gave to us.
And special shout out to our social media, our digital media manager, Dina Paula Rodriguez, who's on the phone somewhere in these Zoom bars as well. So thank you.
And I'm going to special shout out to Eric Williams, the owner of the Silverroom, who has been a long time friend and supporter of A Long Walk Home for at least 19 years of me living in Chicago.
All right, I think we're gonna let everybody go now. I'm so sad, I'm so heartbroken, but we're gonna.
I know, we would be hugging.
Thank you so
Next
much.
time. Okay.
I think it's also being recorded, so all of that good stuff. Okay. Thank you all so much. Have a great night.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Bye.